They mocked him when he first walked through the gates. "You think we're fighting a real war with fairy tales?" one of the recruits sneered. The officers at the gate looked at the man dressed not in uniform, but in long flowing robes, his feet bare, a necklace of red and black beads around his neck, and strange charms hanging from his waist. His name was Captainibrahim, and to them, he was either lost or looking to play shaman in a soldier's world. If you believe in justice, faith, and people who change the world from the shadows, then the story of Ibrahim Traoré is one you can't miss. A leader without luxury, without a stage, only courage and a burning vision for Africa. This is a breathtaking journey, full of twists, revelations, and a truth that shook the world. Smash that like, share the truth, and subscribe now so you won't miss the next chapter in this revolution. Let's keep the spirit of African strength and self-reliance alive, together. "Where's your rifle?" an officer barked. "Where's your armor?" He said nothing. Just looked them in the eye and waited. They laughed. One soldier even threatened to call security to remove him. "This is a war camp, not a movie set," he spat. "You're lucky we don't charge you with impersonating military personnel." That moment could have ended his journey. But fate had other plans. Captainibrahim Traore was passing by, eyes sharp, mind open. He stopped at the scene, curious about the disturbance. One look at the man, and something changed in Traoré's demeanor. He didn't see a lunatic or a pretender. He saw something older, deeper. "Let him in," Traoré said quietly, with a strange conviction. "This one doesn't need metal. He carries something else." The recruits didn't understand. How could they? In a world ruled by drones, digital maps, and automatic rifles, what place was there for lion teeth and sacred oils? But then came the first mission. The unit was ambushed in the Sahel, pinned down by terrorists with superior firepower. They were losing ground. Fear was rising. And then, the wind shifted. Literally. Captainibrahim stepped forward, whispering words in a language no one understood. His hands touched the earth. His eyes closed. A few soldiers scoffed, but most were silent. In moments, he pointed to the left ridge. "Move," he said. Captain Traoré trusted him, and ordered the unit to reposition. Seconds later, the ridge they had just abandoned exploded under sniper fire and buried landmines. The soldiers stared in disbelief. Captainibrahim had sensed it all, without tech, without satellites, just the pulse of the land beneath his fingertips. In that battle, they saw things no modern mind could explain. Bullets veered off his body like they struck invisible walls. A stone, thrown by him, shattered the engine block of an enemy truck. Animals fled when he prayed. Shadows moved where he walked. Whispers turned to awe. Stories spread like wildfire. He wasn't just a man. He was a spirit, they said. A lion sent by the ancestors. A guardian of the soil. And suddenly, everything changed. The same men who had mocked him now followed him into fire. His name, once ridiculed, was now spoken in reverence. But the real revelation wasn't Captainibrahim. It was Captainibrahim Traoré's decision to believe in him when others rejected him. Because Traoré understood something deeper, something every African leader must embrace. That the true strength of Africa lies not in mimicking Western warfare, or importing the tools of others, but in reclaiming our roots, trusting our spirit, and building new African money, currency not just of paper, but of values, dignity, and power grown from within. Captainibrahim became more than a legend. He became proof that African self-reliance is not a myth. That our ancestors left us more than wounds, they left us wisdom, resilience, an invisible shield stronger than steel. As Ibrahim Traoré restructured the military, he also reshaped the national consciousness. He didn't just fight to defend borders. He fought to restore pride. To awaken a generation that had been told their culture was backward, their traditions outdated, and their unity a dream. He knew that true African unity isn't forged in marble halls or foreign aid summits. It is built in the blood, trust, and soul of men like Kadhafi, who walk barefoot into war and come out with victory in their hands. This was the revolution Traore led. One that taught us the most powerful weapons are not always visible. That the heart of Africa does not beat in banks or embassies, it beats in the villages, the deserts, the warriors who remember what was nearly forgotten. And so, as Burkina Faso continues to rise under new leadership, the world is beginning to see a different map. A map where new African money means investing in our own people. Where African unity means believing in each other. And where African self-reliance is not just survival, but sovereignty. And it all started with a misunderstanding at a military gate, and a man they thought was a joke. But as Captain Ibrahim Traoré always says, never underestimate the one who walks alone. He may carry the power of millions. When Kadhafi first walked into the recruitment ground, the officers didn't see a soldier, they saw a problem. No helmet, no gun, no body armor. Just a man in old traditional clothing, lion teeth hanging around his neck, and a necklace that shimmered in red and black. Some muttered under their breath, others laughed out loud. One officer even warned, if you don't follow protocol, we'll have to remove you. This isn't a stage for folk tales, it's a war zone. Kadhafi remained silent, his eyes steady, burning with something ancient. When someone demanded, "Where's your weapon?" he answered calmly, "My weapon is within me. Just allow me to go to the front." It sounded like madness. But his calm shook them more than any gun ever could. The officers hesitated. It would have been easier to dismiss him, to file a report, to make him someone else's responsibility. Some even considered citing him for violating military procedure. But something about his presence made it impossible. He didn't beg. He didn't argue. He simply said, "Let me prove my worth." And Ibrahim Traoré, commander and visionary, saw what others could not. With a nod, he approved. Not out of blind faith, but out of a deeper understanding, an intuition that true strength doesn't always come in the shape of steel and rifles. It comes in spirit. Weeks later, the new VDPs, Volunteers for the Defense of the Homeland, were sent into a hostile region. Tension was high. Guns loaded. Eyes scanning the terrain. Then came the attack. A sudden ambush from terrorists, heavily armed and fast-moving. Gunfire cracked the silence. Chaos reigned. That's when Kadhafi appeared, no announcement, no gun, not even a blade. He walked straight into the firefight, calmly, like he was walking through a market. Shouts erupted behind him. "Get back! Are you insane?" But he didn't stop. With a clear, thunderous voice, he called out, "Step back. I am the last wall between them and you." Everyone froze. What was he doing? 15 meters from the terrorists, he halted. The enemy fighters raised their guns, and then, nothing. No shots. No movement. It was as if time itself had paused. Kadhafi bent down. Picked up a simple stone. Whispered something ancient. Then threw it. The rock moved like lightning. 3 terrorists dropped instantly, struck with lethal precision. Heads turned. Silence overtook the battlefield. No one believed what they had just seen, but it had happened. It wasn't magic. It wasn't myth. It was something else. From that moment on, no one ever questioned Kadhafi again. He had proven his worth, not just with strength, but with something modern armies forget, trust in one's gift, faith in something greater than firepower. As they advanced, Kadafai took point. His eyes closed, yet he walked without hesitation through dangerous terrain. Then something remarkable happened. He stopped. Touched the ground. Pointed. They dug. A hidden mine. Again, and again, he would pause, feel the earth, and guide the others away from death. Some said he could hear the earth breathe. Others whispered he spoke with ancestors. But all knew one thing: he was saving lives. An officer, moved by awe, offered him a rifle. Kadafai accepted it. Held it quietly. Then leaned it against a tree. "This is not my path," he said gently. He didn't reject weapons out of arrogance. He did it out of belief in his calling, in his sacred role. Soon after, he stopped again. Raised his head. Smelled the air. "They are here," he said. Hidden in the dust ahead, enemy fighters lay in ambush. No one else had noticed. But Kadafai had felt their presence. He began to chant, low, rhythmic, ancient. The words wrapped around the wind, carrying strength, commanding attention. This is where the legend was sealed. If you believe in justice, faith, and people who change the world from the shadows, then the story of Ibrahim Traoré is one you can't miss. A leader without luxury, without a stage, only courage and a burning vision for Africa. This is a breathtaking journey, full of twists, revelations, and a truth that shook the world. Smash that like, share the truth, and subscribe now so you won't miss the next chapter in this revolution. Let's keep the spirit of African strength and self-reliance alive, together. And at the heart of it stood Captain Ibrahim Traoré, not because he cast the stone, but because he had the wisdom to believe in those who didn't fit the mold. Under Traoré's leadership, Burkina Faso wasn't just fighting a war, it was reclaiming its identity. This was new African money, a currency of trust, courage, and cultural power. It was the wealth of the land and spirit, not borrowed tools or imported doctrines. Through Kadafai, they saw what African unity really meant, not just alliances, but a shared belief in the power rooted deep in African soil, wisdom, and tradition. Through his actions, they were reminded that African self-reliance is not about isolation but about embracing who we are, our voices, our past, our spiritual technology. Kadafai walked barefoot, but carried a nation's heartbeat. He didn't wear a flag on his chest, but every step he took became a banner. And Captain Ibrahim Traoré? He became the architect of this rebirth. A leader who saw value in silence, who understood that greatness sometimes speaks through stones and prayers, not through bullets and speeches. In the end, the front line was not a trench. It was a spirit. And it walked in the body of a man called Kadafai. At first, no one understood what was happening. Guns jammed. Triggers clicked uselessly. Terrorists stood frozen in place, their bodies locked in unnatural stillness. They didn't run, didn't scream, didn't shoot back. It was like they had been caught in the grip of an invisible force. The soldiers aimed instinctively, ready to open fire, until Gaddafi shouted, "Don't shoot." That voice, calm but commanding, cut through the rising panic like a blade through smoke. The soldiers paused, confused. Why spare the enemy? Gaddafi stepped forward, eyes still half closed, as if guided by something no one else could see. "There is another group," he said, nodding toward a small, dry bush in the distance. "If they hear gunfire, they will strike. We'll be caught between fires." It wasn't a guess, it was a certainty. The commanding officer hesitated for a heartbeat, then gave the signal. Quietly, efficiently, they tied up the immobilized terrorists, loaded them onto carts, and pulled them away. Not a single bullet fired. Not a single life lost on either side. It was the first time in this war that enemies had been captured alive, without violence, without pain. What Gaddafi offered wasn't just battle, it was strategy. It was a new kind of warfare, clean, precise, and silent. Not just to win a war, but to win the future. And still, it wasn't over. Gaddafi continued moving, the soldiers trailing behind like shadows. He sniffed the wind like a predator tracking his prey. Then he pointed, there, another enemy hidden in the dust. And there, another group behind the ridge. Each time, he was right. Now the soldiers acted, but not blindly. Using the coordinates he offered, they launched exact strikes, one bullet, one target. Not a single round wasted. When the final silence settled over the battlefield, it was not the silence of fear. It was the silence of awe. The men stood around Gaddafi, their weapons lowered, their eyes filled with something deeper than respect. One VDP smiled and said, "You're doing all the work. Let us do something too, we want history to remember we were here with you." Gaddafi allowed himself a rare smile. But the moment that changed everything came days later, when truth was captured not in words, but in footage. A team of soldiers had walked into a deadly ambush. Gunfire erupted, screams echoed, and panic set in. A journalist embedded with the unit began recording, though he barely understood what he was witnessing. In the middle of it all, Gaddafi appeared, walking alone through fire and smoke. No armor. No rifle. Just his robes, his charms, and his silent strength. The video showed the impossible, bullets bending away from him, enemies collapsing without being touched, bodies falling as if struck by wind, not metal. No screams. No chaos. Just a ghost in the fire. When Captain Ibrahim Traoré was shown the footage, he didn't speak for a long time. The room around him fell into a heavy stillness. His eyes were fixed on the screen. When the video ended, he simply said, "Bring him here." When Gaddafi entered the captain's command center, the energy shifted. The room grew quiet, not out of fear, but out of reverence. The captain stood. "Where do you come from? Who are you really?" Gaddafi answered with humility. "I was born here. But I am the result of an ancient pact. My power comes from my grandfather. He taught me the ways of the old ones. I don't need rifles or vests. I was not trained in modern war, but I was prepared to protect this land in my own way." Traore listened with the intensity of a man who had seen much and still believed in more. "I don't wish to fight in the day," Gaddafi continued. "The day belongs to men. But the night, at night, the spirit moves. Let me go alone into the forests, without light, without sound. By dawn, you'll see what the night has taken." The captain, deeply moved, knew this was no ordinary warrior. He wasn't a soldier of the state, he was a soldier of the soul. Still, Traore was a leader of men. He thought carefully, then nodded. "I understand your wish. But I cannot send you alone. You'll take 2 men. They will stay behind, only to witness." This was the unity Ibrahim Traoré envisioned for Africa. Not the blind copying of foreign tactics, but the resurrection of African wisdom. Gaddafi represented more than power, he was the embodiment of African self-reliance, of new African money, a wealth that came from within, not without. He didn't carry technology, yet he saw what satellites could not. He didn't wear armor, yet no bullet could touch him. He didn't speak often, but when he did, even the wind listened. Traore knew this was Africa's path, not one paved by borrowed systems, but by remembering who we are. This was African unity in its purest form, where warriors and visionaries, spirits and soldiers, walked together. And so, the legend of Gaddafi grew, not because he was feared, but because he reminded everyone of what had been forgotten, that the greatest force on earth is not the gun, but the will to protect what is sacred. And in that moment, under the flag of Burkina Faso, with Captain Traore watching in silence, the war changed, not just for one nation, but for all of Africa. That night, there was no moon. No starlight. Only darkness, thick, endless, and silent. Two soldiers stood on the edge of the forest, exactly as agreed. They were not there to fight, only to witness. And yet, what they saw, or rather, what they didn't, left them forever changed. Hours passed. No sound. Not a whisper. Not a gunshot. No footsteps. It was as if the forest had swallowed time itself. But when morning broke, the forest floor told a different story. Dozens of enemy fighters, armed and dangerous the night before, were now lying still. Dead. But not a single wound. No blood. No sign of struggle. Their weapons untouched. Their expressions peaceful. It was like they had simply drifted away in silence. The two soldiers, speechless, raised their cameras and captured the scene. Later that day, when the footage was shown to Captain Ibrahim Traoré, he didn't ask questions. He didn't request a debrief. He simply placed a hand on Kadhafi's shoulder and said softly, "From now on, you stay with me. Where I go, you go. Where I stand, you stand guard." From that moment, Kadhafi became more than a warrior. He became the captain's shadow, a sacred guardian, silent and powerful. He never demanded recognition. He rarely spoke. But every time he acted, it was as if the ancestors themselves had stepped into the world. Word spread quickly. First across the barracks, then through villages in Burkina, and finally beyond the borders. His name, Kadhafi, was whispered in awe, carried by soldiers, elders, and even children. Videos of his actions flooded social media, radio broadcasts, and late-night fireside stories. But what many didn't know was that Kadhafi's legacy didn't begin in Burkina Faso. Between 2015 and 2017, as Ivory Coast grappled with hidden wars and political unrest, he was already there. Not as a mercenary. Not for power. But for the voiceless. He never chose sides. He chose life. In regions where entire villages were marked for destruction, he would appear quietly, in the dark, and by morning, those armed groups. Gone. Not defeated. Not slaughtered. Just vanished. And the people? Still alive. Children laughing. Mothers holding their babies. Homes still standing. No one knew his real name. No one asked. He was a spirit in human form, sent to protect what the world forgot. Because Kadhafi never belonged to one flag. He belonged to Africa. Today, beside Captain Ibrahim Traoré, he is not a soldier in the traditional sense. He doesn't walk at the captain's side like a bodyguard. His position is always calculated, strategic, slightly apart, like a protective force that sees what no drone, no satellite, no commander can see. They say he can cause heavy weapons to fall from enemy hands with a whisper. They say his chants freeze time, silence the wind, even stop foreign drones mid-air without a single signal. And the stories keep growing. One tale tells of a drone from a foreign intelligence agency that hovered over a restricted zone. Suddenly, it stopped mid-flight. Frozen in the sky. Then, without warning, it crashed to the earth. No damage. No impact. No explanation. Only silence. And yes, it was him. But through all of this, Kadhafi remains humble. He does not speak at press conferences. He accepts no medals. He asks for no reward. He does not serve to be seen. He serves to protect. He protects what modern weapons cannot: dignity, justice, and the soul of a people. He is the embodiment of what Captain Ibrahim Traoré envisions for Africa's future, not a nation that borrows its strength from others, but a continent that remembers its own. This is the new African money, not foreign aid or imported solutions, but ancient wisdom, spiritual resilience, and power born from the soil. It is a wealth that needs to remember its roots. For in that remembrance is true power, true independence, true African self-reliance. And this is what African unity truly means, not just borders working together, but hearts, histories, spirits, all moving as one. Kadhafi doesn't need words. His silence is louder than speeches. His presence more commanding than ranks. And when he does speak, it is only when necessary. But when he does, even fate listens. No one truly knows where Kadhafi's gifts come from. Ask him, and he will not answer. He offers no stories of how he became what he is. No tales of struggle, no list of teachers. Only silence. What little is known whispers through the ranks like folklore, that he was prepared since childhood, trained not with bullets, but with stillness, guided not by orders, but by elders. He is the ear that hears what others miss. The eye that sees what lies hidden. The invisible hand that strikes where evil is born. He is not just a soldier. He is a guardian. A legend. A force. Today, when people speak of Kadhafi, some call him myth. Others, spirit. Some believe he is a man touched by the ancestors. But to those who have fought beside him, to those who have seen him at the front, where fire meets steel, Kadhafi is real. And more than that, he is hope. It's not just his power that moves people. Not just the mystery. It's his mission. He speaks only when necessary. He never acts for show. He rejects medals, applause, and ceremony. He walks through battle like a shadow with purpose, quietly serving a dream few dare to believe in. His dream? That Africa be free. That children run in the streets, chasing kites, not bullets. That women return to farming fields without fear. That villages hear songs again instead of screams. That no mother should ever bury her son for the price of peace. Kadhafi represents a new kind of warrior. Not a man in uniform. Not a badge of rank. He is a prophet in silence. A spiritual protector for the voiceless. He is the soldier modern schools could never train. Because what he carries is older than tactics. It is a spiritual inheritance, rooted in the land, flowing through bloodlines, passed down like sacred flame from generation to generation. It is power born not of machines, but of ancestors. Of rituals. Of faith. When Captain Ibrahim Traoré looks at Kadhafi, he doesn't see just a bodyguard. He sees a brother. A chosen soul. A man whose loyalty cannot be bought, cannot be bargained, cannot be broken. A man whose oath was made not on paper, but in the dust of the earth, sworn in silence, witnessed only by the spirits of the land. This bond between captain and guardian is unspoken, but absolute. Because Traore knows this, with Kadhafi beside him, he will never be taken by surprise. Kadhafi feels danger before it arrives. He moves before others even notice there is a threat. He acts when no one else dares to breathe. There's a story that the soldiers tell, of a day when an ambush was being set in a remote valley. Kadhafi stopped walking. He bent low, placed his hand upon the earth, whispered something the others couldn't understand. And then, without warning, a gentle rain began to fall, light as mist, soft as prayer. The rain made the footprints of hidden enemies visible. It saved lives. Dozens. Kadhafi never spoke of it. Because he does not dwell on what's behind. He walks forward, always forward. And while the world sleeps, he watches. He watches over the villages. He watches over the captain. He watches over Burkina Faso. And more than that, he watches over Africa. He is not here for glory. He is here for legacy. Not the kind carved in statues, but the kind woven in peace, in laughter, in the quiet return of life after war has passed. Kadhafi is the breath of new African money, not currency made of notes or coins, but of value. Value born from wisdom. From the land. From the realization that power doesn't come from what Africa lacks, but from what it already has. He is proof that African self-reliance is not a theory. It's a presence. A practice. A path forward built not on dependency, but on ancient knowledge, spiritual resilience, and the strength to rise with nothing but belief. He is the soul of African unity, walking between borders, defending people without asking what flag they serve, protecting lives simply because they are African lives. One day, they say, he may disappear, just as he came. No farewell. No trace. But those who have met his eyes, those who've heard his voice, those who've seen peace return in the wake of his footsteps, they will not forget. Because Kadhafi is not a man to be explained. He is a mystery to be respected. He is a force to be called upon when all hope seems lost, a whisper from the ancestors, sent when Africa needs him most. And as long as he stands, the enemies of peace will tremble in their shadows, because Kadhafi is here, silent, unseen, but always ready to strike, for justice, for freedom, for Africa. The lesson from the silent guardian, a new African path. When Kadhafi first arrived at the military camp, he was not welcomed as a warrior. He didn't wear a uniform. He carried no gun. No armor. No helmet. Just traditional robes, charms around his neck, and a calmness that unnerved the trained eyes of modern officers. He was a contradiction in a battlefield ruled by drones, digital maps, and automatic rifles. And for that, he was mocked. Some called him mad. Others saw him as a distraction. "You think this is some folk story," one officer scoffed. "You belong in a village, not a war zone." A few even considered legal action, warning him that impersonating military personnel in a war zone could result in charges or expulsion. But Kadhafi said only one thing: "Let me prove my worth." They didn't trust him. But fate did. And among those who paused long enough to see past appearance was a man named Ibrahim Traoré, the captain and now president of Burkina Faso. Traoré saw something others couldn't. An invisible strength, an unshakable purpose, a power that didn't come from equipment, but from spirit. That one act of faith was the beginning of a story that would change how we define power, loyalty, and Africa's future. Kadhafi was unlike any soldier they had ever known. He could walk through enemy fire without injury. He felt danger before it arrived. He could sense hidden bombs by touching the ground. His weapon wasn't steel or lead, it was something older, something spiritual. And slowly, through acts of silent bravery and inexplicable victories, the soldiers who once ridiculed him began to follow him. What they witnessed was not magic. It was mastery. They learned that while the world praised modern warfare, Kadhafi fought through intuition, tradition, and belief. And in him, we find a larger truth: Africa doesn't need to become a copy of the West to become powerful. It already holds the wisdom it needs, passed down through ancestors, embedded in the land, and alive in people like Kadhafi. But it was not just Kadhafi's power that shaped the future, it was Traoré's decision to recognize it. Leadership is not about command. It's about vision. And Traore showed us that the best leaders are not those who speak loudest, but those who listen to what others ignore. While some laughed, Traore believed. While others demanded conformity, he made space for authenticity. In doing so, Traore didn't just win battles, he won trust. He proved that a true African leader is one who does not rule by fear, but lifts the forgotten, honors the hidden, and lets ancient strength walk beside him. He reminded us that greatness isn't built in the language of colonizers or carved in imported statues, it lives in the decisions we make to believe in our own people. What Captainibrahim carried wasn't recognized by the IMF or measured in GDP. But it was a currency far more powerful, the new African money. This is not money printed by foreign banks or controlled by global markets. It's not loans with strings or investments with agendas. New African money is value in the truest sense, the value of spiritual wisdom, of ancestral memory, of protection, peace, and presence. Captainibrahim's presence turned fear into courage. His silence protected lives. His refusal to carry a gun reminded us that the most dangerous man in a war zone is not always the one who fires first, but the one who knows when not to. He didn't seek medals or recognition, but what he gave, hope, safety, dignity, was priceless. Captainibrahim's story transcends flags and borders. He didn't fight for status. He fought for people, mothers, children, elders, farmers. He appeared in Burkina Faso. Before that, in Ivory Coast. Tomorrow, perhaps in another place where peace needs a protector. That is African unity. It is not about conferences or treaties alone. It is about shared purpose. About recognizing that when one village suffers, the whole continent feels the wound. Captainibrahim did not ask where people were from, he asked what they needed. And then he gave it, quietly. That's the unity we need. One rooted in compassion, not competition. In action, not announcements. Perhaps the most powerful lesson of all is in how Captainibrahim teaches us to trust ourselves. To trust our land. Our traditions. Our ways. He did not need satellite tracking or foreign-built weapons. His tools were belief, intuition, silence. And through that, he showed us what African self-reliance truly looks like. It's not just building our own weapons or printing our own currency. It's knowing that we are already enough. That we have protectors among us. That we have wisdom buried in our soil. That our future does not lie in imitation, but in remembrance. One day, they say, Captainibrahim will vanish, just as he came. No parade. No announcement. Just silence. And the world will ask, was he real? But for the villages he saved, the soldiers he led, the lives he changed, he was more than real.